Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I'll be analyzing the case of Sarah Greenhalgh. I'll start with the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Sarah Libby Greenhalgh was born on March 21, 1964, and initially lived in Potomac, Maryland. This town is 14 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. Sarah's family was wealthy. Her father was an attorney and a university professor. When she was young, her family moved 15 miles northwest to a horse farm in Poolesville, Maryland. Sarah spent a lot of time with horses and became interested in photography. She attended Old Field School, which is an elite preparatory school in Maryland. Studying journalism at Columbia University came next for Sarah. After graduating, she returned to the Washington, D.C. area, eventually renting a one-story ranch-style house located at 1208 Dunvegan Drive in Upperville, Virginia. This is about an hour and 10 minutes west of Washington, D.C. This house was pretty small, often described as a cottage. Sarah worked as a reporter for a few different newspapers. Her last job was with the Winchester Star in Winchester, Virginia. Sarah had a particular interest in true crime. She liked the intrigue and enjoyed solving mysteries. Unfortunately, in a strange twist, she would become the center of her own true crime mystery. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Monday, July 9, 2012, at 8:08 a.m., an off-duty firefighter called 911 and reported that Sarah's cottage was on fire. Firefighters arrived at 8:22 a.m. and took about 20 minutes to extinguish the fire. They called the police after finding 48-year-old Sarah Greenhalgh dead inside the house. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Sarah's cause of death was a gunshot wound to the neck. The murder weapon was a 9mm pistol. This pistol and 12 spent cases were found near Sarah's body. A bottle of charcoal fluid was discovered 15 feet inside the front door. Investigators determined that the fire was set intentionally. This was a case of arson. There wasn't much evidence available to collect inside the house because the fire had been so destructive. Sarah's vehicle was parked in an unusual place on the property. Some of her personal belongings were found in the trunk, as if somebody had loaded them there with the intent of destroying evidence. Perhaps the killer did this, but then abandoned the plan. The police attempted to reconstruct Sarah's movements right before her death. One day earlier, on July 8, at about 7:30 p.m., Sarah was at the apartment of a love interest named John Sheldon Kearns. He lived on Equinox Landing Court in Gainesville, Virginia, which is about 28 miles from Upperville. A neighbor reported seeing the couple argue. Sarah left John's apartment and returned home. At 9:48 p.m., she emailed John, stating that she had always been there for him. She also stated that based on John revealing admissions of wrongdoing to her, she could go away for 25 to life as an accessory. The last known activity by Sarah was a post to Facebook at about 11 p.m. She wrote, quote, "Going to be sleeping with the windows wide open. Now if that bat blank crazy boy would just leave me alone, we'll get some much needed rest because tomorrow is Monday and I got a ton of work to do," unquote. The police spoke to Sarah's co-workers who confirmed that bat blank crazy boy was a reference to John Kearns. On July 9, at about 5 p.m., the police caught up with John at his place of employment. He worked at a body shop in Leesburg, Virginia. John denied any involvement in Sarah's murder and offered a theory that Sarah must have brought an end to her own life. The police noticed that John had significant injuries to his hands. He claimed that this was the result of martial arts training. John admitted that he was romantically involved with Sarah, but denied that their relationship was serious, saying that he had only been to her house on 2 occasions. Despite telling the police that he had nothing to hide in connection with Sarah's death, John deleted all the emails he exchanged with Sarah. When confronted about this behavior, John asked for an attorney. The police continued to investigate. Other potential suspects were ruled out. Everything just kept leading back to John Kearns. In 2014, he was officially named a suspect by the police, but John was never arrested. Years went by with nothing happening. The case was transferred to a special prosecutor in 2019. Despite the lack of progress, the police claim the investigation is active. At the time I'm making this video, no arrests have been made in Sarah's murder. Now moving to my analysis. John Kearns has denied any involvement in the murder, telling the media that he did not have a motive, he had nothing to do with the crime, and he had nothing against Sarah. John has never been charged in connection with Sarah's death. Despite this, many people believe it is obvious he was responsible. They assume that the state of Virginia doesn't have enough evidence, or else John would have been arrested. This brings me to the question, is there enough evidence in this case to charge John with murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that John was responsible for Sarah's death, starting with the inculpatory factors. At the time of the murder, Sarah and John were involved in a tumultuous romantic relationship. John was also romantically involved with another woman named Joanne. The argument at his apartment complex occurred because Joanne was supposed to come over that night. John was worried that he would get in trouble with Joanne because Sarah was there. Sarah's murder occurred a few hours after this argument. There was no alibi for John on the night of the murder. He said that Joanne never showed up, and he spent the night alone. Before John knew what caused Sarah's death, he suggested to the police that she had brought an end to her own life. He claimed that he had nothing to hide, yet deleted email messages he had exchanged with Sarah. And even though he had an excuse in the form of martial arts training, the damage to John's hands seemed suspicious. John Kearns was accused of violent behavior by his ex-wife, Deborah. They had been together for about 7 years before separating in 2011. Deborah claimed that John had major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. She indicated that he told her he had committed numerous criminal acts in the past, including arson and the torture of animals. Deborah said there was a frightening incident involving John on July 31, 2011. According to Deborah, John sent her text messages that day demanding they reconcile before showing up at her rented townhouse and punching the door. Through the window, Deborah could see a knife on John's belt. He threatened to kill her before slashing the tires on her vehicle and scratching the paint. Deborah filed for a protective order. A few days later, John allegedly burned Deborah's wedding dress, photographs, and a cross-stitch project that she had been working on for a year. This doesn't look too good for John, considering how Sarah's house would be set on fire later, almost like John had a preference for arson. On August 24, 2011, John was arrested after physically assaulting a man on a motorcycle while stopped in traffic on Interstate 66. He was convicted of misdemeanor assault on October 7, 2011, and ordered to undergo mental health counseling and anger management. On April 19, 2012, less than 3 months before Sarah's murder, John was arrested again, this time for violating the protective order filed by Deborah. He was sentenced to 90 days in jail, with 86 days suspended. Now moving to the exculpatory factors. John did not possess a strong motive to kill Sarah. He was busy pursuing another romantic interest. Based on the evidence that has been released so far, it doesn't appear as though anything connects John to the scene of the murder. No DNA, no surveillance video, no witnesses, no data from cell phones, nothing at all. Furthermore, the police searched John's vehicle and didn't find anything. Anyone could have killed Sarah. When considering the evidence in this case, do I think there's enough to charge John with Sarah's murder? In my opinion, no, not at this point. What the state really needs to move forward is something that places John at Sarah's house on the night of the murder. This is one of those cases where it does seem fairly obvious who could have been responsible for the crime, but there's no way to prove it. There are many unanswered questions in this case. For example, who did the 9mm pistol belong to? Who owned the ammunition? And was there forced entry into Sarah's house? Perhaps the state has more evidence than they are sharing, but if they don't, it explains why there has not been an arrest. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. John Kearns has been described as charismatic and violent. He appeared to prefer maintaining multiple romantic relationships. His ex-wife said that John advertised himself online as a single male looking for a long-term relationship. This was during the time they were married. When John was dating Sarah, he was also dating Joanne. Sarah may have been more invested in the relationship than John. She had been described as intense, abrasive, outspoken, confident, direct, and someone who never minced words. Sarah probably wasn't too happy with John's behavior and was not afraid to let him know her feelings. Based on the email that Sarah sent John right before her death, maybe she knew something incriminating about John's past, something that John wanted to conceal. Maybe this is why Sarah was murdered. Now moving to my final thoughts. John Kearns is in an uncomfortable position. He continues to be a suspect, but there has not been an arrest. It's like the sword of Damocles is dangling above his head. Everybody is waiting for the state of Virginia to make their move. Even though there is no statute of limitations for murder, time is on John's side. The state of Virginia appears to be stuck. Without new evidence, there's nothing they can do. If they could have charged John or anyone else in this murder, they would have done it by now. It is, of course, possible that John is innocent, and some mysterious intruder decided to kill Sarah out of nowhere. They just happened to pick this random cottage that was actually pretty far from the roadway, murdered the occupant, set a fire, and leave. All this was done with no clear motive. If this is true, then John has the worst luck in the world. Someone just happened to kill his lover right after an argument during a time when John was alibi-free. If John wants to escape the anxiety of waiting for the state to make a decision about the case, perhaps he should go on the offensive and start a campaign to find the real killer. He could start his own investigative service called the O.J. Simpson and Casey Anthony Detective Agency. Those are my thoughts on the case of Sarah Greenhalgh. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Some people might look at this case and wonder why Sarah was romantically involved with somebody as undesirable as John Kearns. What was she thinking here? She had a good job. She was intelligent. She was successful. Why didn't she select a better partner? What was going on with her thinking? There's no way to know for sure, but one possibility is that Sarah had alienated a lot of people in her life with her direct mannerisms. She was described as somebody who was outspoken. It sounds like she was kind of loud and maybe even obnoxious at times. She had strong opinions about just about everything. I think this puts a person in a position where they just don't have the same number of romantic options. Certain people are just not going to deal with that type of direct and maybe overbearing behavior. She was put in a bad spot, and she ended up settling for somebody like John. In reality, it doesn't appear as though John was really interested in Sarah that much. So not only was she selecting an inferior partner, that partner may not have been reciprocating those feelings. I've seen this many times where people who are boisterous and outspoken really do push a lot of people away, not just in the realm of romance, but in the realm of career, in social settings, in all types of different environments. They just find themselves kind of alone. Sarah did live alone in this cottage, and I wonder if part of that was her personality. Being abrasive and intense can be helpful when somebody's trying to succeed as a reporter, but those same characteristics can make a love life pretty challenging to have. Maybe that's what happened with Sarah. She found herself benefiting from her personality traits in one way, but paying a price in another.